What's happening? What's happening? Let a few more get up here before we get started. Running kind of late today. Had to do some work out in the shop tonight when I got home. Everybody hear me all right? I'm on a new phone again tonight. If you can't hear me, let me know. New phone, brand new iPhone. We're getting a few folks up here. Again, can anybody comment? Can you hear me fine? All right, sounds good. All right, another Thursday evening in the neighborhood. It's been a few weeks since I've done a video. I've been out of town or busy. A couple weeks ago, I was scheduled to do a show, and we went to the Big O up in South Carolina. I done some videos from up there, some live videos. Walked around the pits a little bit. That was a really good show up there. And last week I was out of town again. Had something important to do. We went to the beach. First time me and my wife's been to the beach since I think 2012, I believe it was. So it was long overdue. Anyway, thought I'd do a little quick video tonight. I'm gonna try to honestly do a quick video tonight because there's not much to cover when it comes to this topic of gear ratios and how different sprocket sizes and stuff can affect your roll speed and things like that. It's a nice shirt, ain't it, Wayne? Got on my Cody Stevens racing shirt tonight. I told people, if y'all send me t-shirts, I will be glad to wear them near my video. I wore one in the last video, and I'm wearing one with one of my homeboys. This is one of the really good up-and-coming drivers in the area. Runs a lot of Junior 2, Junior 3, runs Outlaw and Run What You Brung with me sometimes. Real good kid, real good driver, real good family. So I'm proud to wear his shirt tonight. So there you go, Cody. He brought it to me personally, so I had to wear it. Anyway, anybody else sends me a shirt, I'd be glad to wear it during the video also. But kind of go ahead and get to it tonight so we can kind of be short and sweet if possible. Gear ratios. In karting, this is mainly to do with karting, mini biking, sort of, but mainly karting. Junior drag racing, it would be a whole nother type of video because most of the junior dragsters use torque converters, belt drive stuff, so that's a little different from what I'll be talking about tonight. Tonight I'll be talking about chain drive, you know, your standard clutch and gear like your standard dirt karts and asphalt cars use. Ratio is one of those topics that is very debatable. People debate it all the time about big gears versus small gears. Does this help? Does that help? But when it comes down to it on these karts, ratio is ratio with these clone engines. You know, these overhead valve engines, they have, you know, a little more torque than what the old flatheads did back in the day. The big debate was back in the flathead days about a big driver on the clutch. This is one of our mongrel clutches here. This is one I use every now and then. But the debate was the gear on the driver. You know, is a big gear and a big rear gear ratio being the same as a small gear and a smaller rear gear, is one faster than the other. But when it comes to ratio, in my opinion, ratio is ratio in most aspects. Now, sometimes different gear sizes can help you with roll speed, especially in these stocker style engines. You know, when it comes to modifieds and stuff, ratio is ratio. Whether you're running a 14 driver or 15 driver, if you got the same ratio, you're going to get basically the same results on the racetrack. And ratio, for the ones that don't know, this is one of our older ARC magazines. This one's from 2001. I believe Hunter colored that himself with some Crayolas. But if you've got one of these old books laying around, and I believe I think the Dyno Cams books has it in it, but in the very back, there's a gear chart. And what this is, this tells you the ratios of your gears. I'll get my little number 2 pointer here. If you look across the top, you'll see, 16 twos, 15, 14, all the way down to, I believe, 9, which that'd be mighty small. But that's your driver, the one on the top. That's on your clutch. That's this one here. Now these gears down here, it goes from 53 to 100. And yes, they do make 100 sprockets. I've got a 90 right here. But typically on your dirt carts, you're going to be using anywhere from 53 to 68 probably, sometimes 70, 71. But the ratio is the gear on the back, which is the bigger sprocket on the axle, divided by the gear on the clutch. And it's simple math. All you got to do is, if you're running a 60 on the back and a 14 on the front, you divide 60 by 14. That gives you your ratio. And you can do it with any size, whether it's 70 on the front and 10 on the front, 70 on the back and 10 on the front. You take 70 divided by 10. You divide the axle by the clutch, and that gives you your ratio if you don't have one of these charts. Now, when it comes to ratios, you can have several different clutch drivers sizes and several different rear axle sizes and be the same ratio or within the same ratio. Typically, for every 1 tooth on the front, mathematically it equals 3.5 on the back. But I tell people go ahead and round up to 4. So you can't use a half a tooth. But 1 tooth on the front equals basically 4 on the rear. So if you're on a 1560 and you go to a 1664, that's the same ratio within a small percentage. Basically, it's the same. Or if you're on a 1768, that's basically the same ratio, but you're going to have some different results because of the size of the driver. And the size of the driver, when people talk about a bigger driver is going to give you more straightaway speed, a smaller driver is going to help you off the corner. If it's the same ratio, kind of yes, kind of no. But back in the flathead days where all this really come from, the engine, like I said before, didn't really have the torque that these little overhead valve engines do. So we had to rely on roll speed, and we wanted to run as big of a front driver as we could get and stay, below 66, 67 maybe on the rear. Because what that does, here, this is a 17 driver. There's 17 teeth. This is a 13. There's a big difference there. And where the difference comes in at is as the chain rolls over it. This 17 driver makes a bigger circle. The chain doesn't have to twist. These links are long. They're that long. And when it goes around these gears, it has to bend. And the smaller circle it has to go around, the more it has to bend and the more friction it causes. That takes away roll speed on the top end. Coming out the corners and stuff, if it's a momentum track, I like running, a bigger front driver in most cases. That's not so important today, like I say, with the overhead valves, but with the flatheads and like with the plate engines, especially the small plates, the greens and the reds, I like to have a really big front driver on it, and from 65 to maybe 67, 68 in some cases on the rear. That just helps with roll speed on the top end because the bigger driver makes a bigger circle. It's just like a racetrack. You got a racetrack that's got really sharp corners on it, you got to slow down a lot, or you drag a lot of speed. You lose a lot of speed from drag through the corners because you have to turn it so hard, and things gripping and biting, it just slows you down, versus a track with long sweeping corners. You're wide open all the time, you barely lose any RPMs through it. That's kind of the same principle as gears. The bigger your front driver, the longer circle it's got to make and the less drag it makes on the chain. Now, rear gears, it's not as important. A 53 gear which is the smallest that most companies make, you know, it's big enough. You know, you're not going to get a whole lot of chain drag on it unless you run your chain really tight, which you're not supposed to. But the big difference is in the front drivers by how big of a circle the thing has to make. And some of you guys, I know a lot of my Arkansas guys, I got a lot of customers out in the Arkansas and Oklahoma area. They run on really small tracks out there. I think one of their biggest tracks is, you know, I think American Motor Speedway. And I think the stockers run 14s there. And most of the tracks I run in around here, most of the stockers run 16s and 17s and turning the same RPMs. So they have to run smaller drivers out there, and it's a little harder for them to use the ratio thing to get less chain drag, because, you know, the biggest they're going to run most of the time is at 14. And so it doesn't affect them as much. Now, like I say, when it comes to modifieds and stuff, don't worry about it. Ratio is ratio. If you want to run a 1260, if you want to run a 1364, it's the same ratio basically, and you're gonna get the same results. You know, looking at your chart here, what you do is just show you the same ratios. Right here is 12 tooth, and go down to 60. That's a 500 gear ratio, 500 even. All right, and a 1364 is a 497. 3/10. That's or excuse me, 300s. That's not going to affect the RPMs hardly at all. Even I don't even think the tack will pick it up. That's so close. But like I say, 1 tooth on the front is technically mathematically 3.5 on the back, but I tell people to go ahead and say 4. So 1260 is basically the same ratio as a 1364, which is basically the same ratio as a 1468. Yeah, 1468 is a 490. Yeah, there's a little bit more there. That's a pretty big jump, but 1 tooth back and forth on the driver and 4 on the rear, you're going to get really close ratios. And I got a piece of metal in my hand. I just found it. Been looking for it. That's the important heads and stuff, and that aluminum will get in your hand and you can't see it. You have to feel it and use a razor blade and stuff to get it out. And I finally found it. Been trying to find it all day. Anyway, way off topic. But also the length of your chain can affect your chassis a lot. A lot of people don't think about it. You know, a lot of people have been racing for a long time and don't know it, but a lot of people just really don't think about it. Is the length of your chain can affect your chassis, how it performs, because it moves the engine, you know, closer to the rear tire or further away from the rear tire. We, especially with stockers, we want to push that engine as far away as we can get it. We want, you know, the longest chain we can get, push that engine way forward, because what it does is that moves that 38-pound block away from the right rear tire. And because the closer you get to the right rear tire, the more weight it puts on the right rear tire. And 80% of tight conditions, especially center off, is because the right rear tire is overloaded. That's why you put cross and stuff. That's why you put left side weight and stuff, is you're trying to get the weight off that right rear tire. You want it to grip just enough to hold the go-kart in the corner. It grips too much, you start getting a tight condition center off. I'm not saying it pushes, I'm just saying the kart is snug and don't have really good exit speed. And if you go from one track to another, where one track you're having to run a 14 driver, and the next track you got to go to a 16 because it's a bigger driver or it's a different engine. And a lot of people don't lengthen their chain out. They just slide the engine back, and that can cause some handling problems. All my karts, the people I help, people I deal with, will have a line drawn on our frame, like with a yellow paint pen or white or whatever. The engine does not come back further than that. Don't care what you do. If you got to change the gears and the engine comes back past that line, we're putting some links in the chain. And dang, I should have brought a chain brake in here with me to show people how to do that. Easiest way to do that, we sell a chain brake. It's part number 3720 that breaks the chain. It pushes the pin out of it like this, You push the pin out, and it lays back in it, and you take a link out, put a link in, push the pin back in, chain's great, you go right on about your business. But you know, there's a very small area that we move our engines, and if we have to pull it back, you know, anymore, then we add links to it to get that the engine away from the right rear tire to keep the weight off of it. You know, some people talk about, you know, you got to run a chain so tight, you got to run it so loose. You want a lot of flop in it, you don't want a lot of flop in it. But the dyno testing I've done with all this, and I've done this years ago, not too much recently, but years ago I've done it with the flatheads and all. We had a light go out. Tested the big gear, small gear, you know, ratio thing, and found that, you know, we made, with the flathead, especially plate engines and plate clones and stuff, we made a little more. We're talking a tenth and a half on the upper end with, you know, bigger sprockets. Now, you know, your pro clones, your unrestricteds, it's not that important in those as it is the lower horsepower stuff. But we also tested chain links, and you know, I found that there is an area where the chain can get too long and create a lot of flap while it's running, even though it's pulled tight. You know, the longer this chain gets, the more harmonics go through it, and you know, it doing like this right here as it's running, that's pulling back on the engine and causing things to slow down. And when you set in your chain, I like to have somebody sit in the go-kart. What I do is I set it, and I've set mine on my kart, my personal kart, so much I know where it needs to be. What did I not say? Harmonics. What did I say? Harmonicas. I ain't tell them what I said. I'm talking too fast tonight, but I know how loose my chain needs to be without me on it. With a new go-kart, what I do is I'll set the chain, I'll put the tires on it with the air pressure I'm planning on running, I'll set it down on the ground or on the scales or something, and check how loose the chain is, because you got chassis flex. You know, these chassis are designed to flex in certain ways in certain areas to move weight or to transfer weight or this or vice versa. And when you got the chain where you think it might need to be, you set the go-kart down, it may loosen up, it may tighten up. But that's why I always check the chain. Was, you know, I'll tighten it up, get it where I think it needs to be, we'll set it down on the ground, set in it, and have somebody check it. Because, you know, if you turn around and looking at it, you're moving weight around. You need to be sitting in the go-kart like you need to be and have somebody check it. And, you know, roll it back and forth a little bit to make sure that everything's good. And you won't just, you know, half inch of slop or whatever. But once you learn, if you keep a chassis long enough like I do, I typically wear them out, literally. Some people, you know, go through chassis 2, 3, 4 different types a year. I don't know how they can afford to do that. I can't, but once you keep a chassis long enough, you can learn where to set the chain without somebody. Once you set it a few times and then you get off of it, you know, and is it looser, is it tighter with somebody not in it, and you'll understand and learn where it needs to be. But that's another thing I see a lot on the grid, and I saw it up at the Big O with these high power karts up there, and that's usually not a good thing. Sitting on the grid up there and their chains going from the rear axle to the driver was looped down like that. I mean, and then they get on the throttle to go and it pops. You know, you don't need that much droop in your chain. I mean, they run all these chain guides and this, that, and the other, but you know, you don't want it stretched tight. You don't want it looping. You need to find a happy medium, you know, with some, you know, decent. It's kind of hard to do, you know, but you want a good, you know, half inch, 3/4 wobble in it with somebody sitting in it, because it does change the way the chain, you know, tightens and loosens as the chassis flexes. And you also got to think about the chassis flexion on the racetrack. That's something you really can't adjust or can't notice how much it is written without a chassis dyno. I know a lot of people, these chassis shops, they have chassis dynos, and what that does, it bolts to the axles and flexes the go-kart and mimics what it does on the racetrack, and you know, they know how much the chains move. But I've never been on a chassis dyno, so I don't know how much the chain flexes or not. But a lot of people can tell by the way their gears wear to if they've got too much, too little, misaligned chain, stuff like that. You know, this clutch here has got about 5 races on it. You know, and you can start to see a little backside wear on them, but another thing to support it, making sure the chain's aligned. You know, a lot of people use laser gauges and stuff. It mounts to the back and shoots a laser to the front. Most people can't afford that. Hell, I ain't even got one. I've never used a laser gauge on a chain. I still do the eyeball thing. You know, even though I'm half cross-eyed, done it long enough to, you know, what I do is I reach up there while the chain's, you know, on the clutch, and I hold the clutch, and then I take the rear end and I pull it backwards so that the chain pulls really tight, you know, and I can, you know, look and you can look down it and see if it's straight enough. If it's not straight enough, you're gonna get a lot of wear on the edge of your sprockets. Your sprockets are gonna, instead of, you know, wearing evenly, they're gonna have a leaned in look to them, and that'll tell you if your chain's not straight. Even though it's not straight, they usually will stay on with all the guides and stuff that we use, but you're causing drag. You know, anything you can do to reduce drag in these things, you're going to get better top end speed. You're going to get better speed all the way around the track, because that chain not being straight may stay on, but it's dragging the gears and it's slowing you down. And little things like that is what gets somebody from a third place go-kart to a winning go-kart sometimes. Just little things like chain drag. You know, making sure that, you know, your rear end isn't too tight in your cart. You know, I've seen people, you go up to the carts and with the chain on it, mine you can do it, spin it, and it'll sit there and spin for 30 seconds with the chain on it. And I've seen some people with the tires on, without the tires. Some people with the tires. You go up there and spin their chain, it turns over one time and stops. Either the chain is way too tight, something's out of line, the bearings still have dirt in it. You know, you got to keep them bearings clean. You know, keeping stuff free. You know, that speed, yeah. And I got a lot of questions here. Let me take a second, kind of go through some. These people just kind of saying, "Hey, what's up?" So, hello from Chicago. Yeah, Cody is the man. Going back to my Cody Stevens shirt. This is a few weeks ago. We was down in Nashville, one of our local speedways, and he was running for 1,000 to win. Started outside pole, led every lap of the race. On the white flag lap going in turn 3, his motor blew up. God, his motor blowed up, not blued. I guess blued is past tense of blowed. But his engine had disintegrated. And when it did, it kind of kicked the chain to the side, or he could have coasted. He was a half a track ahead. He could have coasted to the win, but wound up running 3rd. Thanks for the help, David. Rob board info. Okay, you're welcome. No, Lawrence, the bigger drivers on the front gear, they give less friction, and that helps with less chain drag and less friction. That helps free up power on the top end. It doesn't give you more power. It doesn't take any power away. It frees it up. It keeps the chain from dragging power down. As long as you're in the same ratio. Like I was saying before, you know, a 1660 is the same basically ratio as a 1764 within a couple of tenths. On momentum tracks, what that kid's in there doing. On momentum tracks, a lot of times I like using bigger drivers just because of the less friction on it. But no, it doesn't give any power loss or power gain. It just frees up speed a little bit on the top end because it doesn't have as much drag. Most of these are just people that joined. What makes chains tight in some spots and loose in others? A lot of times it is stretch. It could be the chain is kinked or bent, like, you know, rolling it on and off the sprockets. If you force it up there, as it goes over that sprocket, you know, it can bend the chain, you know, like that, and, you know, cause one of little links to be bent, and when it goes over the gear, it kind of, wobbles around. It could be worn gears. If you had a bad chain on a gear, it can cause the chain to wear funky, or if you've got some gears that are bent or warped, it could cause the chain to wear funny. There's several things that cause tight spots, and some of them are, people using, and here we go. Hello? Hi, how are you? What are you doing?
Hey, Daddy.
Do you want to come in here? Come here. It's going to be a first. I'm actually going to let him come in here and speak. Come here, buddy. This is the one that makes all the noise at the door when I'm doing my videos. This is my son, Landon, for those of you that don't know. You say hey? You say hey?
No.
You can't say hey? You for once going to be shy? Uh-oh, he's camera shy. Oh, no. All right, well, just tell everybody bye. Can you do that for me?
No.
Tell everybody no. Don't you wrinkle up your face at me.
Mama.
Mama. All right, go to your mama.
Come on, baby.
You gonna go stand right there now? I'll make you get back on TV again. Anyway, that's Landon. That's the one that makes all the noise whenever I'm doing my shows and hooping and hollering and banging and all that stuff. That's him. Anyway, what was I talking about? Oh, tight spots. A lot of times when people use chain brakes, the pins, they either push the pins out too far and it bends them, or they don't get them in far enough, or get them mated just right, and it can cause a tight spot. A lot of times that'll happen anytime you take a link in and out, because those pins, they're braided on the end, and when you push them in and out, it can kind of bend this in and out just a little bit. A lot of times, if it is from the chain brake, once it's pulled on a couple times, that goes away. If you're consistently coming on and off the track and your chain has got tight spots in it, you've either got a misaligned or bent sprocket, or your chain itself is actually bent. Something needs to be changed. Could be a bent axle also. It could be a bent chain guard. It could be a sprocket hub. Could actually be bent from running off the track, and you either bent the sprocket or bent the hub. But something's out of line or bent. Richard, when it comes to opens and modifieds, I don't really care. All this big sprocket, small sprocket stuff is kind of out the window. I run whatever ratio I need to run. But typically, I don't like to run below 55, 56 on the rear. I don't like to get above a 68. So anything you use the front driver that's inside that, I use. Typically, I try to stay between 60 and 65 on my rear gears. Typically. Now, sometimes you can't. Like we went to Zebulon the other weekend, I wound up on a 58 on the rear because that's all I had with me. That's the biggest front driver I had, so I had to go down on the rear. But typically I try to stay between 60 and 64, 65 on the rear. But no, opens, this sprocket stuff does not matter because you got horsepower. Bigger tracks, maybe like in stock appearance, but opens, I just run ratio. Oh, what you're hearing is it's bath time. And for some reason now, he likes taking showers. What you hear him screaming, shower, shower. He wants a shower, not a bath. He's a big boy now, so he's got to take a shower. And that's what you hear. She's not hurting him in any way. He just wants to take a shower. I'm running 2 different size chains with a jack shaft. I'm assuming you're running a 35 to the jack shaft and maybe a 40 or 41 to the rear. Still, ratio's ratio. When it comes to even the 41 chains, the old 219 chains, ratio's ratio. And you got to get your ratio correct. Typically, when I run jack shafts, I like to run a 1-to-1 the same size sprocket on the engine as I do on the jack shaft, and then use normal, ratios from there back. Some people like using 2-to-1s or 1-to-2s on jack shafts and then go back, but I like running 1-to-1s. That way I use normal gears, like 1662s instead of 18s and this, that, and the other. But I like 1-to-1s and then run your regular ratio from there back. But does a floating rear gear hub help? Yes. Because like I was saying before, with chassis flex, the chassis, they flex in the rear end when you go in the corners and stuff and going over holes, which means the axle's moving in it. I ain't saying it's moving that much, but when you go in the corner and that right rear tire gets loaded up, that axle bends like that and it goes in the corner, which on the outside of the bearing, which on this side of the bearing, it actually tries to bend the opposite way. So the chains are going to be misaligned slightly. We're talking tens and hundreds of thousands, not inches. We're talking thousands. But with that floating gear hub, it keeps everything pretty much in line, and I do think they really help, especially on the stockers. Yeah, I run a floating one on everything except my unlimited. I run one of our solid ones on it. 219 and 35. 219 chains come out several years ago. A lot of people still use them in sprint racing and road course style racing. They was a smaller pitch chain. The teeth on them were closer together. They were smaller, but you still figured ratio basically the same. And those were, because the teeth were smaller, the links on the chain were closer together, meaning it reduced drag. It would have the same drag on a sprocket this big that a 35 chain would have on this big, because the links were smaller. They could go around a circle, a smaller circumference, and not drag as much as a 35 would. But they were expensive, and people was having a hard time, figuring the ratios with them that they needed. So everybody went back to a 35, and that's what people run now. Wayne, I was streaking before. Oh, you're talking about Landon streaking. Yeah, when he gets out of the shower, he likes to run around naked. He won't come in here for that, I hope. But you never know. You never know. Yeah, everybody's always asked me, when you going to let your son come on? I'm like, he can come in here anytime he wants to. We got a little gate up over there. He can climb over it, as you see. But he, is one of those, believe it or not, he's 3, and he wants permission to do things. I guess it's a good thing he does that sometimes. Sometimes he just runs around like a wild monkey. Skip 2 sprockets. I knew that was going to come up tonight. Skip 2 sprockets was something else that came out several years ago as a way to reduce drag. They made skip tooth drivers and they made skip tooth rear gears. And what a skip tooth is exactly that. They would go in there and take out 2 teeth. I mean, it'd be flat right there, and then you'd have 2 teeth, and they'd take out 2 teeth, and you'd have 2 teeth, take out 2 teeth. But it was the same size sprocket, but there was teeth missing. And the theory was that without them teeth there, it reduced drag. Same thing on the drivers. They actually had, 13-2 drivers that was missing some teeth. But what I found that it done, that this, like I say, when the stuff I say on here, this is stuff I found. This is my opinion, my studies, my results. I'm not saying everything is set in stone. But what I found was it made the chains wear out really, really quick. Because you're putting, especially on the drivers, you're putting excess pressure on some of these pins, and it would cause the chain to wear and stretch in odd ways. And you're replacing the chains and the sprocket quite often on them. And once again, a lot of people got away from them. There's some people that still run them. I think the PRC sprockets are half sprockets. They're half teeth, I think. They got normal size teeth, and the one beside it is, half tooth. So it's still kind of in the sprocket, but not all the way, so it doesn't create as much drag. But stuff like that, it helps, but you also get a downside on it of accelerated wear, or what I call funky wear, which is accelerated wear, basically the same. But a lot of people use that kind of stuff, but most of us has kind of gone back to the standard 35 stuff. It's easier, it lasts longer, and you're not gaining a whole lot on Saturday night racing by using all this skip to stuff. Some tracks you might be on these bigger ones, but most tracks you're not. Oh my God, my mom was watching. See, now I can't cuss or do anything, and my son can't run through naked because my mama's on here and she'll say something. That's when you know you made it, when your mama's watching your videos. Hey, mama. Run small tracks up here in Mississippi. Jonesboro, okay, run 13 on front. If that's the right ratio for the track, a 1364 on a red plate, that's got to be a small track. Because around here on red plates, we're running 17s, or actually we're running 18s on most of the red plates. And, 62 to 65 on the rear. But that's got to be a pretty small track to run that gear. But that's the right ratio, yeah. If everybody else is, running 1257s, 1258s, stuff like that, 1256s, then yeah, 1360, 64 is going to be the one tooth bigger that I was talking about to help reduce drag. But like I was showing you on the chart, if you get too far outside that, like if everybody's running a 12 and you go to a 14, then you're going to have to do some more math to get back to the same ratio because it spreads out a little bit more. You're going to have to go to a 69 instead of a 68, but anyway, if that's the right ratio, yeah, that'll work. You can ask anything you want, bud. Just type your question. I'll get to it if I can. Uh-oh, what'd I do? Yeah, Dakota, that's something else you got to watch out for, is asking people about gear ratios, because when you're new and running the back, you're getting laps, they'll be, I hate to say this because it makes racers sound bad, but I've had it happen to me when I was going to a new track, didn't know the track. I've got to where I can walk around the track, and get a measurement of it and kind of halfway hit a ratio, but years ago, I relied on people, and you'll go there and ask them what gear you're on. They'll probably get you close until you start running up front. Or if you come there and you run up front to begin with, and you ask them another question, sometimes they tend to lie to you. And they'll tell you half of what you need to know and then lie to you about the rest. So you got to watch. I wouldn't really call it lying. It's just protecting the stuff that they've worked for. I'm going to back up and I'm not going to call them liars, but they're protecting. They've worked hard, they've done their homework, they've done their laps and found out what ratios work, and they kind of don't want to give that away. When I first started working at ARC, that was one of my biggest problems. They stayed on me about giving out information because I've been racing since I was 7, building my own stuff since I was in my early teens. With karts, cars, and so I've paid my dues and I've done my homework. And when I get up there at ARC, people call in and want to know, hey man, what do you do about this and that? And I knew what to tell them, but I didn't want to tell them because I worked hard for this and I felt like I was just giving information away. And, well, of course, that's changed with me because I'll give anything. I'm an open book now. I'll show you on my cars. I've brought people over to tell me what gear I'm on. I'll say, go over and count it. I'm on a X and X, and if I tell you, it's the truth. But a lot of these racers, they're not really, I don't really want to call it lying. They're just protecting their investment, I guess you can call it. They've worked hard, paid their dues, and just don't want to give out the information, which I don't blame them. But it is nice to have people that will help you out. And there's a lot of racers that do that. You got these few that want to hold on to their little precious or whatever, but most racers in general will tell you pretty much what you need to know if you're new, because they understand that without new racers, they're not going to have a sport to race in much longer, which is what turned me around when I went to ARC is, the more people I can help, the more people I can get on the track, not only the better our business is going to be, but the better other businesses are going to be, the better the tracks are going to be. And without karts on the track, none of us are in business. So a lot of people out there that'll help you, but you got to watch out too, because they some that want to be sneaky. Yeah, they want if they know you know, you've been at other tracks and they know who you are and they've seen you win at other tracks and you come to their track and ask them something, watch out just watch out the information you take, you know, because I'm not going to call them liars, but they just tend to lead you in the wrong direction. A 1074, holy smokes. Well, Lawrence, you answered my question. The reason I don't like running 74s and 75s on the rear is because of ground clearance, which is something else. I'm glad you brought that up. It made me remember something else I was going to say about ground clearance and tire sizes. But you're only running on 34-inch, on average, 34-inch circumference tire, and if you get the gear, you know, even to within a half an inch of the tire, when you get on the racetrack, the tire's flexing, the chassis is flexing, the tracks, you know, bumps and all, and that sprocket could hit the ground, and when it does, it could bend it. It could bend the chain, it could bend the sprocket, it could bend the hub, and you know. But there's some situations where you have to run big gears on the back and 10 on the front, because you're not going to find any 9-tooth gears that work on these engines without using jack shafts or hanging them off the end of the crankshaft, which is not good. But yeah, ground clearance is the biggest reason. On the rear, I don't like going over 68. Because if you do run off the track, sometimes going on and off the track, in and out the pits, you have to go over a berm and it can hit it and bend it and cause problems. But to back up to the gear ratio thing, something I forgot to say is, like with these red plates and stuff, if you notice, like on box stocks, the true box stocks, like the Predators with the stock air boxes, weenie pipes, they put you on a gear rule. And a lot of the tracks also put you on a tire circumference rule, because if you, with your gears, say the gear rule, you must run a 16 on the front and you can run a 60 to a 62 on the rear. That's all you can run. You must run a 16 on the front, and everybody must run between a 60 and a 64 on the rear. All right, so you get it on the racetrack and you put a 60 on the back, which is as small as you can get, which is going to give you the higher ratio, and you're running out of, you're floating the springs before you get there in the straightaway, which means you need to go smaller on the rear to get the ratio high. You can't do that because 60 is as small as they'll let you go, but you actually need a lower gear on the back, or a lower number of gear on the back, less teeth, put it that way. You need a higher ratio, less teeth. So what do? You grow your tires. Most time on the back of these carts, people average 1-inch rear stagger, 34 circumference on the right rear, 33 circumference on the left rear. You take that right rear and bump it up to 35 inches and 34 on this side, you just went down possibly 3 teeth on the gear. You went to a higher ratio. That bigger tire has a longer foot pattern as it rolls. It's going to roll 1 inch further every time it goes completely around, which is about 2.5 teeth on the rear. That's a lot. That's why a lot of tracks put tire circumference sizes on it, because people were cheating that, and we were doing that years ago. When I was building plate engines for people that run over an Alma on that big old track over there, they had a gear rule over there in the flathead plate class. They didn't have a tire circumference rule. We had tires that was like 35.5, 35.75. They look like inner tubes on these things, but we got a higher ratio and was winning races with it. Was that cheating? No, because they didn't tell us that we couldn't do it. That's the gray areas. That's why I get paid to do this, because we think about stuff like that. We're always trying to innovate. It's not cheating if the rules don't specify. There's gray areas in almost every rule, and that's part of my job. That's one of my biggest jobs, is just to find gray areas. And when tracks call me up and say, hey, we want to do this class, we put a gear rule on it, the first thing I say is, you better put a tire circumference rule on it also. 34.5 inches on the right rear. You ain't got to put one on the left rear, because if they can't go over 34.5, chances are they're not going to go bigger than 34.5 on the left rear either, because the go-kart's got to turn. So I tell them to put a 34.5 inch tire limit size on the right rear as it comes off the track. Don't let them cool down. When they come off the track, put a tape on it, measure it. If it's bigger than 34.5, see ya. Because people will fudge the rules, with bigger tires. Especially in the plate classes. And people do it anyway, even when there's not gear rules on it, because, you can get your stagger right, and you can get the tires softer, and, with take some side bite out of them. You got a really light go-kart. These red plates run a lot of air pressure. I do. The guys I help, we run a pound, pound and a half, sometimes 3 pounds more air in our tires than, other ones do, because one, the go-kart is so light, and two, you're trying to pump them tires up to get more roll speed out of them, but you got to have your tires prepped for that. You can't just take a set of tires that you've rolled and prepped and run at, 5 and 6 pounds and just blow them up to 10 pounds and go out there and expect them to work. You got to work the tires to be run that way. There's a way you roll them and a way we sand them so that they have side bite and stuff, so you can run that higher air pressure. That higher air pressure is going to give you less roll resistance, and you're going to have faster straightaway speed. And Brian, gears is something that it's aggravating, but once you understand how it works with the teeth and what this many teeth here does, and taking this many teeth off, and chain length, stuff like that, it's simple. But it can be aggravating, especially on tracks you've never gone to, and trying to guess trying to guess the gear ratio. But I always tell people, especially in stalker classes, if you're going to a track you've never been to before, and it's a little bigger than what you're running on, it's better to go to that track geared too high than geared too low. And that's another thing that people don't understand about gear ratios is high ratio versus low ratio. Think of it like the gears in your pickup truck. Your dad's old truck. There ain't many 5-speeds out there no more. Your dad's truck, your granddad's truck. First gear is a low gear. Fourth gear is a high gear. When you go from the lowest gear, which is first gear, that's your 10, 11, and 12 tooth drivers. Then you got second gear, you got 13, 14 drivers, and third gear, 15 through 17, and high gears is 18 and up. But the higher the ratio, the slower you're going to start off, the more top speed you're going to have. The lower the ratio, the faster you're going to start off, and the quicker you're going to reach max acceleration. But just think of it like a truck, low and high. That'll help you get through a lot of it. A 13-inch OD, I guess that's tall, okay. I have no idea what kind of gear ratio you'd need on that. A 13-inch tall tire. See, a KT100, that's a 2-cycle. Most times the clutches don't engage in them things to around 8,000 RPMs. You're going to be turning it, 14, 16,000 RPM. So you're probably going to need somewhere between, depends on how far you drag racing. You're going to need anywhere from a 9 to probably an 11 tooth driver on the front, probably 9 or a 10, and a sprocket that's probably 3/4 the size of the rear tire. 13 inches is a pretty good size tire. Yeah, you'd be somewhere between a 9 and a 12 on the front, just guessing, But the mini bike thing is rear tire size plays a big difference in gear ratios, because 1 inch of tire is several teeth on the driver. That's why I tried to do this mainly about karting. Hey Charlie, if you get me a Tanner Hamilton t-shirt, I'll wear it. I will wear it in front of ever how many people watch these videos, and it's in the tens of thousands. So they don't watch it tonight. Usually our live thing averages 50 to 100, but the views afterwards, man, goes into the tens of thousands sometimes. So a lot of people gonna see it. That's something else. Watching for rocks coming on and off the track. Track we went to, where was it? I can't remember where it was. It was somewhere out in the Midwest years ago. It looked like they took, the gravel they put on railroad tracks, and that's what they was going to originally make the grid out of, and they decided that, hey, go-karts are sinking that stuff, so they just put dirt over it. And when you're rolling out onto the track, them rocks would go up there and hit your chain and your sprocket, and you got to watch out for stuff like that. Nitro Gears. The Nitro Gears are some nice gears. If you're into series racing, big money racing, you racing a lot of stiff competition, where tenths of a thousandths is the difference between starting on pole, making the race. the Nitro Gears, any investment you make for reduction of drag or lightweight is going to have benefits in racing like that. Take for instance the Big O. I'm wanting to say in the limited class that I didn't have anybody up there racing. I was up there, hanging out with some people that I knew from the area. But he wasn't but just under 2/10 off the pole and qualified 61st. 2/10. So anything you can do, to help reduce drag or get lightweight is going to help. Okay, I don't know nothing about snowmobiles. I live in South Georgia. If we see snow down here enough to require a mobile, we think the world is ended. We think that Armageddon's happening. I don't know nothing about snowmobiles. But if it's got a normal jack shaft, like I say, I like running a 1-to-1 on jack shaft. Some people do different ratios on jack shafts, but I really don't know. And if I don't know something, I'm going to be honest and tell you I don't know, instead of trying to talk my way through something and make it sound like it. I'm just going to tell you I don't know nothing about snowmobiles. I'm a Georgia boy. Cool. Yeah, you mini bike guys, I've been trying to work with y'all a lot more about gear ratios and tires so I can get a better understanding. And that's going to be one of my next projects to do at ARC is I'm going to do a mini bike. I'd like to do, one of those stretch, lay down style mini bikes. Don't want to talk too much about it. I think it's going to be pretty cool what I'm planning on doing, but planning on doing it and actually doing it is two different things, because planning on it, all I do is talk about it. Actually doing it requires time and work, which is something none of us really have. I was on the dyno until 30 minutes before I done the show, running here and wolf down some chicken and run through the shower, and I really want to build a mini bike really bad. I think we could do something really cool. And I need to get into that market more, because I get a lot of phone calls. I get a lot of questions about mini bikes that I really don't know. I find out for them. I call the people in the know, but it's my job when people call up to have some type of answer and not say I don't know. I can get you an answer. So I need to get in the mini bike market. I need to build one and figure out how to do the jack shafts and the ratios, because the small, some of y'all run smaller tires, some of y'all run bigger tires, wide tires, skinny tires, and mini bikes are making a huge comeback. It's a big market, and we have a lot of customers in it. And sometimes they call me up, and I just have to tell them I don't know, and I'm not scared to say I don't know. I don't claim to know everything. I just act like I do. That's something I talked to Brian. That's something I talked about a little earlier. Identical ratios, with just using different gears. There's going to be such a small difference in them. Are you looking for more on the bottom or more on the top? If it's the same ratio, you got the same tire size. I honestly don't think the butt dyno can feel it. The butt dyno is your butt in the seat, what it feels. A lot of people talk about dyno and engines, and no, I don't have a dyno, I use the butt dyno. The butt dyno is what your butt feels in the seat. And I don't think the butt dyno tells enough difference between two different gear sizes, exact same ratio. My actual dyno barely could. And, it was an acceleration thing, it was how much power it lost on the very upper end. It didn't, the chain didn't drag it as much on the upper end with a bigger driver. But that's what I talked about earlier in the broadcast. But yeah, I would really like to do a mini bike and actually go race it somewhere. Before I get too old to do this. Yeah. But I knew somebody was going to ask me. Me and Hunter was talking about this before I left work today. Somebody is going to ask me a torque converter question, and I'm going to have to say, I've never messed with one. I do not know. I've never messed with a Comet torque converter. I've never messed with any torque converter, period. I've built many junior drag race engines. I've built many mini bike engines. They hook them up to the torque converters. I've never messed with one. So, like I said before, I'm not too scared to say I don't know. I can hook you up with people that know a lot about torque converters, but I don't know enough about them to really have a conversation with you. I know they work good. I've seen people try to use them on karts at the track. They don't work good there. They work really good drag racing. That's basically what they're for. Yeah, Jason, I'm a kart person. But anyway, I don't know what time it is. I'm using my phone. This is my new iPhone I got. I had to sell a lot of blood and work a lot of overtime to get this thing. But belt drive. I got limited experience with a belt drive. My experience with a belt drive is one race, and I never touched nothing on it. But I do know when I done the road racing back at the first of the year over in Robbling Road in Savannah, those enduro karts, they use a belt drive system, and it's basically the same, teeth and all as sprockets and all. I believe it is, but it's a very smooth system, very smooth. There's no vibrations, there's no harmonics. It's faster, no doubt. I mean, the belts and all might be a touch heavier, I think. I don't know. Like I said, I've never measured one just looking at it, but it's a really smooth system. I really wish karting would allow that. I think it'd be a lot better than the chain stuff we're using now, but I've got very limited experience with the belts, but I know people that have a lot of experience with them. But I really like belt systems a lot. They're really nice. Flat track racing. David, that's kind of I'm gonna spoil it here. That's kind of what an idea I have about my mini bike. I want to do. I want to do a dual engine setup, but I'm not sure what engines I want to use yet. There again, it's just talking about it and actually doing it's gonna be two different things. Because I had a little more, about that much free time when I done my last dual engine setup, which is why I went to the 390s, because it required too much maintenance to race from week to week to week than the 390s do. But yeah, that was a fun build. I really enjoyed that a lot. Well, Gene, if I ever have a question about torque converters, I will be sure to look you up, because I know nothing about them. That much. Zero. If you're running you're going backwards on your ratio here. An 1163 is a higher ratio than 1165. This is where a lot of people get confused. I should have talked about this at the first. There's something else I forgot. When it comes to these drivers, the smaller number you got on the front, the lower the ratio is. The bigger the number you got on the front, the higher the ratio is. The rear is just the opposite. With the rear, the smaller you have on the back, the higher the ratio. The bigger you put on the back, the lower the ratio. That's why I tell people, everybody's got cell phones now that's got calculators on them. Figuring ratio is easy. You don't really necessarily have to have one of these books. You do it on your calculator on your phone. You just take the rear sprocket, divide it by the front sprocket. That gives you your ratio. And the smaller the number, the higher the ratio. A 482 is a higher ratio than a 827. But if you got an 1163 on it now, and you put an 1165 on it, you will be very slightly slower down the straight, but it will take off slightly quicker because you have a slightly lower gear ratio. You know, two teeth is on most tracks. You know, if you're running, you know, a typical track and you got an 1163 on it, you're turning 6,500 RPMs. You drop it to an 1165, you should turn 6,700 RPMs. It's usually about, you know, two teeth is usually about 200 RPMs. Dang, I've been on here an hour. I want to do this for 30 minutes. Dadgummit. I talk way too much. Too bad I don't get paid by the word. If I got paid by the word, I could retire at the end of the year. No, it's not legal to run belts in any karting. Well, you know, open modified stuff, UAS stuff, you can, I think you can run belts. I'm sure you can run belts. Heck, I'm a UAS director. That don't look good, does it? If you can, I'd run them. I'd run belts if I could get a hold of what I wanted. But yeah, belts are not legal in AKRA, NKA type stuff. You have to run a chain. Marshall, we make quite a bit of parts for Briggs mower parts. The thing is, when the engine and stuff parts that we make for the mowers, you have to know the model number of the engine. The cylinder number and the horsepower rating doesn't tell us much. We need to know if it's a model 31, model 28, you know, model 40. That's the first two numbers in the model number. It would be 40 or 31 or 28. That's how we build parts off of it. We build quite a bit of mower parts, you know, connecting rods and flywheels, and a few crankshafts. Well, Ricky, that's why we're here, man, to try to help people. May not be the best information, but it would at least get you pointed in the right direction. Now, like I say in all my videos, I don't see all these questions for some reason. After I post a video, I'll go back and there'll be 10, 15, 20 questions that I didn't see, so they don't all pop up. You know, so if I miss them, I'm not ignoring you. I just honestly didn't see it. You know, it didn't come up, and I usually go back and answer them after I post a video up. Yeah, that's right, Brian. You want the ratio of your gear on the track. You want to reach max RPM just before you get to the corner. You don't want to be wide open at the flag stand. That's called gear bound. When these stock engines, they won't turn but so hard. I don't care what you sit there free, you take the chain off of it, they won't turn but so hard. And once they reach that limit, that's it. And you're gear bound. That means that's all she'll turn. You need to drop some teeth on the back, and so it goes on down the straightaway. That's a good point there, Brian. Actually, Lawrence, it is in the rules about chains and stuff. It is. Trust me, it's in the rules. If not, just show up to your next AKRA race with a belt drive system and see how fast they come running over there to you. Ask me how I know that. Well, since I've been on here for an hour, all I'm doing now is kind of rambling. White knuckle speed up. I've heard of that. I think I've talked to you several times. Jim, if you're running a 1562 and turning 6200, what kind of engine is this? Is this an AKRA? Is this a plate engine, flathead? You know, because if you're only turning 62, you know, go up a few on the back. You know, go to a 64 or 65, unless other people's running that gear. If you're running the same gear as somebody else and they're turning 66, you're turning 62. You got handling issues or engine issues. Yeah, Hunter's a pretty good old feller. Now the sprocket size on the front doesn't affect horsepower, it just affects ratio. Like I was saying earlier, low gear, high gear. First gear is taking off, third gear is for on down the straightaway. Not really easier on the engine. You know, that's more of your clutches there. You know, I'm more of a fan of clutches that are smooth and engaged. They don't have that jerky motion. You know, when you get on it, it feels like it's gonna break your neck. That is rough on the engine. That alone is one of the roughest things you can do to a crankshaft. Is have those clutches, especially high horsepower. You know, 1-inch or 7/8 journal crankshafts with a lot of horsepower, and they hit the accelerator and that clutch engages and it just locks up and throws them back. That is rough on the crankshafts. And probably half the crankshafts that break are because of stuff like that. But that's why I'm a fan of the smooth engaged clutches, because they take off just as fast, but they're not rough on the engine nor rough on the chain. Bigger or smaller drivers usually shouldn't affect, you know, the engine as far as being rough or easy on them. Shouldn't, if you got the clutch set up right. All right. Arena sprockets. I'm assuming arena sprockets is those, you know, like the 10s and the 9s that they actually hang off the end of the crankshaft. I happen to have a crankshaft here. This is just a BSB. Actually, it's a Predator crankshaft here. Yeah, the arena. This like crankshaft is messed up. That's why it's here. The arena sprockets, they hang way out. And I hate this. Off the end. But what that does, you know, if you've got this crankshaft is messed up. That's why it's in there. I'll probably be able to get this clutch. There it goes. Typically, you know, you want your gears in like this. You know, in closest to the engine, the sprocket's in there. And what that does, that puts the pivot point here on the crankshaft, and it's short, and it doesn't pull the crank back as bad under power. When you put them arena gears on it, you have to turn it outboard, and the gears, there you go, hanging way out past the end of the crankshaft, and you've got a longer fulcrum here, which pulls that crank back harder. It just puts more pressure on the crank and can lead to damage down the road. I'm not a fan of them, but a lot of times, especially in arenas, you got to run them. I mean, they're either that or a jack shaft. So if you got to run them, you got to run them. There's nothing you can do. I'm not a fan of them, but a lot of people use them. All right. Look at a couple more questions. I'm probably going to wind it up. Holy crap, I just hit a button and a whole bunch more popped up. The drivers and all, like I say, Rick, it just depends on the ratio. You know, larger front, larger back, smaller front, smaller back. Depends on the ratio. If the ratio is right, you know, it shouldn't, especially on a motorcycle, shouldn't make that big a difference. Just looking at something, somebody put something over there. Boop-a-boop-a, all right. You a little late there, Heath Sims. Ain't like you work. Let me scroll back through these questions one more time, and I'm probably fixing to wind it up. Because I got some other work I got to do tonight. And try to get to bed before midnight for once. Alright, well, like I say, I know I confuse the hell out of everybody tonight, and that's what I do, I guess. But you got any more questions or anything, drop me a line on here. You can call me at the shop, 800-521-3560. ARCracing.com is our website. You can email me directly at jody@arcracing.com. That is JODY@arcracing.com. Give me a call, talk to you. You can continue asking questions on here. I'll answer them when I can. I should go through and answer some tonight. Gear ratio, not that hard. You just got to learn the difference between low ratio and high ratio and the numbers. And, like I say, these charts right here will help you out a lot. They're in a lot of our old magazines. This is from actually 2001. But if you got an old magazine of ours, they're in there. You can download them off the internet. Really help you out a lot with ratio and help you understand what's going on with these gears. Big front, small back. What does it do? When somebody says take a tooth off, what does that mean? Just any more questions, just call me up, leave a message. Appreciate everybody joining tonight. Cody Stevens, I didn't see you on here, but here's your shirt. You're welcome. I appreciate it. Thank you. Anybody else want to send me a shirt, feel free. I wear a medium. I will wear it on the show. Yep, that's it. Thank y'all. We'll see y'all in a couple of weeks. I should be doing another one, and probably 2 Thursdays from now. So we'll see y'all then. Thank you.